Oh God, Dane.
Today we'll be looking at Falcom's RPG gem, Legend of Heroes: Trails of Cold Steel. This game was recently ported to the PS4 and is well loved by RPG enthusiasts. I personally think the game is great. Sure, it keeps you on rails for most of it, but the well-balanced and engaging battle system, Persona-like structure of dungeons and school life, and most importantly, the colorful and multi-layered cast make this a must-play for any lover of the genre. And that colorful cast is exactly why we are here today. We will be making a tier list of Class 7. There are 10 permanent party members in this game, and we'll be examining each one and placing them on a tier list, starting with the crap tier and ending with the god tier. We will be taking into account stats, crafts, and overall ability. All of this will be based on endgame, although early use is considered as well. Also, stick around to the end to hear the optimal party setup.
Okay, leave it to me! Take this! There! Here!
This is what we're really capable of.
Without further ado, let's get started. The tier. Trails of Cold Steel is surprisingly well balanced in its characters, and thus contains no party members that would be considered crap tier. With that being said, let us start with the low tier. Number 10, Eusis Alborea. Eusis, member of one of the four great houses, is a cocky swordsman who keeps himself distant from the other members of Class 7. His character arc is built much slower throughout the game, and his rival-like relationship with Machias makes for some great moments throughout.
Reen!
There we go.
Eusis is the party's jack of all trades. There really isn't a job he can't accomplish. He can be a decent attacker with crafts that are based mostly on attacking. He also has a high magic stat and thus can be used as either a support or offensive mage. Noble Command is useful at the start of battle, buffing strength, speed, and ATS. Unfortunately, Eusis does none of these things the best, which is the curse of most jack of all trades characters. He is by no means a bad character, just not the best.
You're in the shoe! Crystal Saber!
Number 9, Lara Arcee. I know people are going to be angry, and I'm sorry. Lara is the physical DPS of the party and can destroy multiple targets with one swing. Many of her crafts are useful in taking out hordes, especially Brilliant Spin, which can draw in surrounding enemies before attacking them. She can buff herself immensely with Radiant Wings, which gives her strength and defense at a 50% buff, while debuffing her ATS and ADF. Unfortunately, Lara falls very short in two very important areas: speed and ADF. Bosses are almost guaranteed to attack twice before she goes once. This means that long drawn out battles are her weakness. On top of that, she will fall to almost all heavy magic attacks due to her low ADF. This makes it so she isn't even useful as a tank. Sure, you can use all of her gem slots to buff her speed and ADF, but then you're just left with a mediocre character. Number 8, Milium Orion. Milium seemed to me like a character thrown out of left field. She joins Class 7 halfway through the game and doesn't seem to fit in with the older group. With that being said, she does bring a levity to the more serious characters. Her constant jibes at Eusis and comments on how big Emma's boobs are is especially welcome.
Wow! That makes your boobies look even bigger!
Milium has almost the same utility as Lara. She is a heavy hitter with insanely high defense. What sets her slightly above Lara is her high ADF and her attacks that hit the entire field. With that being said, she also suffers the same fate as Lara. She has a very low speed stat and an even lower HP stat. Again, you'll be using most of your slots to cover for these shortcomings, making her a not so useful character. And that ends the low tier. Moving on to mid tier. The mid tier is comprised of characters that are extremely useful in the early game. Case in point being Gaius Warzel, who boasts some good beginning crafts as well as high natural speed and evasion. Though his stats aren't amazing, they are well rounded, making him a very safe pick. Gaius' utility comes mostly in the form of delaying enemy attacks. He is a fast character and also has many AoE attacks that can delay hordes or bosses. His evasion makes him a little less squishy than he would have been otherwise. A perfect character for beginners who are working their way through the old schoolhouse.
Together, we're unbeatable.
Number 6, Elliot
I
Craig.
thought my heart was going to jump out of my chest. Hey, Reen, are you okay?
Easy now. Hands where she can see them.
Elliot and Emma are the two mages of the party and thus stand out from everyone else in this list. Trails of Cold Steel doesn't do art users justice in this first installment, and thus they are in a strange position. Depending on how you use them, Emma and Elliot can be extremely useful as both support or attackers, though it is usually easier to just forego them for craft users like Fee, Reen, Elisa, and Machias. With that being said, they aren't bad choices either. Elliot is another early game must that helps keep your party alive while also dishing out some considerable damage. He is most suited as a support character, especially if given the right quartz, but can also be a heavy damage dealer with the right arts. His support skills are amazing during the first half of the game, especially Surrounding Beat, which gives a defense buff as well as HP regain, but later on there are just better options for support. I do like that his staff turns into a violin though, a fun little detail.
You've been a wonderful audience.
Moving on to the top tier, Emma Milstein. Emma, the uncontested ultimate waifu of the Trails series. Or is it Rixia, because she's amazing. Or maybe it's Strizard, or Sharon, or even Sarah. We can't forget Yuna. Oh, and Muse. And, okay. There's a lot to choose from, but Emma is babe numero uno. She's also the better of the two mages. Emma really is best used as an art nuker. Her high ATS stat can be put to good use clearing mobs and hitting bosses with excessive force. Her speed isn't anything to write home with, and she can be slightly squishy, but Emma also has the potential to dish out the highest amount of damage of any other character in the game. Also, her story is the most interesting of any member of Class 7. By the way, if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, follow me on Twitter at LowCloudane for video games and anime news as well. Number 4 of the top tier is Reen Schwarzer. There is nothing bad to say about Reen. He's pretty much good at anything, though it is better to use him as either an evasive tank or fast DPS over an arts nuker simply because arts aren't as useful as crafts. Reen's real utility is found in his arc/craft, which can almost indefinitely delay anything that is not immune. With high speed, this guy can ensure that no enemy is able to attack. Just be sure to pair him with a good CP support character.
Don't! Stop!
The God tier. There are 3 game-breaking characters in Trails of Cold Steel. The first of which is Machias Regnitz. Machias is arguably the second best support character in the game, though many could possibly argue that he is the best party member in the game. He can be best described as an AoE attacking support tank. Yeah. His attacks are mid-range and can hit multiple enemies. He has many crafts that are AoE and also can inflict status ailments on enemies. He has a high defense and ADF stat along with decent HP that makes him very hard to kill. With all that being said, what really rockets him to the God tier is his craft Burst Drive, which accelerates the whole party. This can make for some devastating combos to the point where you can down a boss before he can even damage you.
This is what we're really capable of.
The next broken character is Elisa Rainford.
Ouch.
Whoa, sorry about that. Are you okay? I should have picked a better place to take in the scenery.
Sure, Elisa isn't anything to write home about when it comes to stats. She has a long-range weapon but doesn't do much damage, and she can be somewhat squishy. But all of this is overshadowed with the ability Heavenly Gift. This ability gives insight and CP regain, making abilities like Reen's Arc Slash or Machias' Burst Drive a reusable resource, as well as constant use of S-Crafts. Overall, Elisa turns any character into a god tier character, making her the ultimate support character of the game. The final character on this list is also the most broken of the entire game. Fee Clausel is an evasion goddess. She has the highest evasion stat in the game, and with the right items such as evergreens or patterned shirts, along with Thor, Falco, or Mirage Master Quartz, she is literally untouchable. From there, simply whittle down the enemy with status elements and her useful AoE crafts. She is truly a god tier character, if there ever was one.
Go!
Now, the optimal party can be changed around a bit depending on what you would like to do. In theory, using Reen with the Thor or Vermilion Master Quartz, Fee with the Thor or Falco Master Quartz, Elisa with a Master's Quartz that gives her survivability, defense, or ATS advantages, and Machias with Mobius makes an untouchable team. Reen and Fee attack while Machias supports them with Burst Drive and items, while Elisa focuses on CP regain and healing. I personally think that using both support characters is overkill and would switch Machias for Emma, having her focus on arts damage with emergency healing if needed. Also, it's Emma, so yeah, you know. My name is Lokaldane, and today we will be analyzing the party members of the RPG sequel Trails of Cold Steel 2. Similar to the tier list of the first game, we'll be focusing on characters' base stats and abilities. A lot has changed from the first game, mainly that magic is much easier to use and additional abilities have been tacked on. Also, stick around to the end of the video where we will reveal the optimal team for your playthrough. So let's see where the members of Class 7, plus a few newcomers, fall on our list. Tier. Alphen and Elise are endearing characters in the story, and I especially love Alphen's complexity in this game. But man, do they make some crappy allies. Use both at one point during the story and then get access to them in the final dungeon. My advice? Don't use them. Their affinity will be low and their attacks and stats are just bad. But if you love a challenge, go at it.
Wait, don't lose yourself to anger! That will only lead to a repeat of what happened 8 years ago!
Elise.
Low tier. The only character on the low tier this time around is Millium Orion. Now, like I said in the first tier list, this game is pretty well balanced. You can use almost anyone and still come out on top. Millium just happens to be one of the more average characters. She has insane defense and can handle most attacks head on. She also has many attacks that hit the entire field with a few that can cause delay and feint, but her low HP and low speed put her low on this list.
Okay, it's Millium time!
Whoa, hold up!
Mid-tier. Gaius Warzel hasn't changed much from the last game. He still has decent evasion as well as some good crafts and arts. He can fill pretty much any job that is required of him. Just don't expect him to be the best at anything. Next is Toval Rondonor. Toval is an arts king. In fact, arts are his only use. Using him for physical attacks and crafts will get you nowhere, but his high ATS along with some strong arts can make him quite the mage. Lara Arseed. Lara has jumped up since our first list. This is mainly due to an increased strength and critical stat. She is your one hitter. In fact, if you don't one hit the enemy, her abysmal speed is sure to make you wait. But with the increased usefulness of magic and a few quartz, this can be corrected with deadly results. Again, to all you Lara fans out there, I am sorry. Elliot Craig. Last on the mid tier is Elliot. Magic users are much more useful this time around, and Elliot is no exception. But he is dropped on this list because his main role as a support character is just overshadowed by so many other better supports like Sharon, Eustace, Machias, or Elisa. With that being said, he is no slouch. In fact, if you are looking for a safe playthrough, use him from beginning to end. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. Also, follow me on Twitter at LowCloudAim. Now, on to the top tier. Claire Rivalt is a better Toval. She can use arts very effectively while also wielding some useful crafts such as Flawless Leadership, which buffs attack and defense, or Frigid Rain, which can hit a large area as well as freeze enemies. Her long range attacks make her great as a back row support, and she has blue hair, which is hot.
Milliam, I'm so glad that you're all right. It's wonderful to see you again.
Sarah Wallenstein. The Boobacious teacher of Class 7 has gotten a raw upgrade since the first game. She is one of the best balanced characters out there, a lot like Eustace, though her ability swings towards physical attacks more than arts. She's faster than Gaius and has crafts comparable to Fee without the godlike evasion. She is a great pick for any team. Machias Regnitz. Machias is probably the only character in the second game who didn't change from the first one. He is still about as useful. His god tier skill Burst Drive, long range attack, and good defense putting him back in the top tier. Eustace hasn't changed since the first list either. He is still the jack of all trades, with Noble Command sending him up the chain a bit more. But again, and I feel like I've said this a lot, with the upgraded usefulness of arts, his high ATS now moves him from low tier to top tier. Like Sarah or Elliot, he is a very safe pick for your team.
Not bad. You actually held your own for once.
You know what you can hold? Your damn tongue!
Sharon Kroger.
Severing chains. I'm afraid your fate is now sealed.
Tea time. That's all I have to say. Sharon is a lot like Sarah in both speed and hotness, but she possesses a skill that rivals Noble Command, Heavenly Gift, and Burst Drive. Tea Time hits all allies, heals 50% HP, as well as cures all status ailments. On top of all that, it gives plus 50 CP. Yeah, if you paired this with Heavenly Gift, your team would be a CP generating machine. Oh, and don't forget her S-Craft that has 100% KO.
That was a cinch.
The final one on our list is Elisa Reinford. Fast, beautiful, a lot less whiny than the first game, and still possesses the best craft in the game, Heavenly Gift, which gives CP regain to the party. Give her the Mobius Quartz, and she is the best support character out there. God tier. Emma Milstein. Oh Emma, waifu of waifus, goddess of hotness, mage extraordinaire. I can't explain how happy I was to find out that Emma is the best arts user in the game. She has the highest ATS stat and can and will be your biggest damage dealer. On top of that, her craft Crescent Shell becomes way more useful, especially for boss fights, since arts are used way more often in this game. Reflecting a magic attack becomes key to defeating some harder bosses. I'm looking at you, McBurn. Next is Fee Colossal. Fee, like Machias, hasn't changed. She is still the evasion goddess and can have 100% evasion before the halfway point of the game. Using her as an evasion tank is key in beating some of the harder bosses. Giving her quartz and equipment that give high crit, high counter will make her nearly unstoppable. And finally, we have the man of the hour, Reen Schwarzer. Now, there are a few reasons Reen has risen to the top. First is that he gets to use Valimar, which doesn't do much as far as damage, but can absorb some deadly enemy arts and crafts. He also gains the ability Spirit Unification, which gives him immunity to status ailments and plus 50% strength, defense, and speed. With some of the best stats in the game, he can pretty much destroy anything. Now, as far as best possible team composition, this one surprisingly can be changed around. Again, like I said at the beginning, this game is very well balanced. Now, the no-brainers are going to be Reen, Fee, and Emma. Fee should be your evasion tank and Reen your physical DPS. Emma, of course, will be your main DPS with her devastating arts. The final slot is Mobius. Yes, you heard me. It's not a character, it's a master course. Give Mobius to either Elisa, Sharon, or Machias. I guess you can throw in Eustace there as well. And there you have it, the tier list for Trails of Cold Steel 2. I'm so excited for the third installment, and we'll be playing it day one. Let me know what you guys think, and as always, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later. Today we will be talking about the 27 usable characters in Trails of Cold Steel 3. We will be rating characters by endgame stats, crafts, S-crafts, and the new ability Brave Orders, which have utterly changed the game for the better. Now, there is some clarification I need to get out of the way before I get going on this list. I love this game. It was by far the best in the series so far. But after beating it, I went back to study the characters and realized that this was the most disappointing part of the game. A tier list is kind of hard due to the fact that you don't get access to many characters consistently throughout the game. Yuna, Altina, Kurt, Muse, and Ash, along with Reen, make up the new Class 7 and will be the only members you have access to through the majority of your playthrough. Old Class 7, along with other guest characters, come and go, making this a really hard list to complete. But seeing as tier lists are what we do around here, I will attempt it anyway. I'm going to rate each character as if they were the same, with their lack of availability playing a minor part in their placement. And don't forget to stick around to the end where I will reveal the optimal party for your playthrough. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get started with the tier. The crap tier is made up of Patrick, Toa, and Lecter. All three of these characters are used for a very short section of the game. Patrick and Toa are hardly worth talking about. Lecter has a single useful skill that has a chance of causing status ailments, like death, on any monster including bosses. This skill can ignore any resistances they may have.
Bad luck facing us. Guess I'm moving up.
Low tier. First on the low tier is Millium. Out of everyone in Old Class 7, you get access to Millium the least. She pretty much is a carbon copy of Altina with a much less effective Brave Order. Next is Tio, another temporary guest character. A fan favorite from the Crossbell games, Tio has been severely nerfed since then. She has a pretty amazing Brave Order that gives absolute protection plus 80 CP, but it's pretty expensive and wouldn't be worth it if you could use her throughout your playthrough. The final member of the low tier is the first one from the new Class 7. Altina is slow, extremely slow. She has some decent versatility and is probably best used as a support mage, but she suffers from the same issues Eustace had in the first game. By being a jack of all trades, she becomes less useful overall. First on the mid tier is Olivert, another very temporary guest character. There's not much to say here. He's not bad, but yeah, you don't use him for very long. One of the new mechanics introduced in this game is the break mechanic. Breaking enemies and laying down heavy damage is the single best strategy in the game, and there are a handful of characters in this game that do that well. The first of these, and the next on the mid tier, is Agate. Agate is yet again another very temporary character, but he can do some of the heaviest damage in the game, and his Brave Order does plus 250% break damage, which makes it much easier and faster to break enemies. Next on the mid tier is our first mage and another member of the new Class 7. Muse seems to be a universally hated character in the series. I don't understand this. Her pursuit of Reen and her mysterious nature was really fun and I thoroughly enjoyed her. With that being said, she is possibly the worst mage in the game. Arts are extremely useful and can potentially give out some of the heaviest damage in the game. Muse has a high ATS, so she is useful in this aspect. but everything else about her just sucks. Her crafts, S-Craft, and Brave Order are practically useless. Ash is next on the list and another member of the new Class 7. Ash's one and only focus is damage. He is a Lara clone with a Brave Order that increases critical damage, making him a good BP generator as well. Midway through the mid-tier is the next mage, Elliot Craig. Elliot is a much better version of Musei. He has great ATS but with some better crafts as well as a decent S-Craft to back it up. This coupled with his Brave Order makes him a great support character with a focus on party survivability. Next is the Rhineford maid, Sharon Kruger. Sharon is a perfect support for any evasion take setup. Her Brave Order can up evasion by 50%, which is huge. She has some great crafts to back this up as well, and also has an S-Craft that has a 100% instant death. But again, you don't use her for very long. Angelica Rogner is again a very temporary character. Pretty much she is here because of her Brave Order, which gives insight and a huge boost to critical rate, making her one of the best BP generators in the game. Next on the list is Tita, another returning fan favorite. Tita has given up her gun for a small mech, and overall she is the definition of a tank. She can take a lot of damage with her great defense, as well as a range of crafts that not just keep her alive, but can cure the party as well. And finally, the undisputed DPS of the old Class 7, Lara is and always has been a beast. But her slow speed and inability to take on any other role really put her at a disadvantage. But when you can one-shot bosses with the right setup, no one can dispute her place at the top of the mid-tier. Next is the high tier, and boy do we have a lot in this section, so let's get started. First up is Gaius. Gaius got nerfed from the previous 2 games, making him less useful than he's ever been. So why is he in the high tier? Simple. Gaius has the single best S-Craft in the game. Not only does it put out a ridiculous amount of damage, it also has a guaranteed delay despite any resistances. This coupled with the break and delay strategy makes him an insanely useful CP tank. Next is Eustace. Eustace is overall an above average character in almost every aspect. He has great crafts, support abilities, damage abilities, and he can perform arts with his high ATS and really doesn't suffer in any way. Really, he's the less useful version of Reen. There are better characters, but no one is quite as well rounded as he is. Kurt is one of the first members of the new Class 7. He is what some would dub a glass cannon. He doesn't start out particularly powerful, but as he gains skills and is given the right quartz, he can be quite devastating. Not just that, but his starting quartz is the best in the game. His Brave Order works really well with the break and delay strategy, which again is the best strat in the game. Really, you can't go wrong with Kurt. I'm sad to announce that Fee has been knocked off her perch. Evasion tanks are still as broken as ever in this game, but they are also much more accessible. Yes, Fee has required win slots that can work well with that build, but overall she isn't the broken character she used to be. Her main purpose is to be built as an evasion tank, but so are many other characters you might choose, such as Reen and Kurt. Speaking about characters that aren't as useful as they were in the first 2 games, Elisa is one of the best support characters in the game. But seeing as CP is much easier to gain thanks to some awesome master quartz and sub quartz, along with items like the gladiator set, make her ability Heavenly Gift not as useful. It's still good enough to get her in the high tier, but not as useful as it has been in the past. Next is a very broken character in the game. Claire is used a few times in the story, and she has made it to the top tier because of her Brave Order, Perfect Order, which has the potential to accelerate characters infinitely. Break your enemy and continually spam her order, and there isn't a single boss that can't stand up to you. And speaking of the break strategy, next up is the break goddess herself, Yuna. Yuna is possibly the best non-broken character in the game. She is the spear point in the break strategy with the ability to switch between close and long range combat, useful crafts, high strength, and speed, as well as an amazingly cheap Brave Order that increases break damage to 300%. Yuna is a must for any optimal run. The final character on the top tier is the waifu of waifus, Emma. Emma is without a doubt the best caster in the game. She has insane ATS, which makes any art cast by her devastating. On top of this though, she has both a craft and an S-craft that casts perfect reflect, making her perfect in a tight spot. Her Brave Order isn't quite as useful as others, but can also come in handy at times. Also, well, I'll let Fee say it.
And Emma, you grew even chestier.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't mention that.
The God tier. First on the God tier is Ariella. Honestly, she should probably be higher, but you only use her for a single mission. But during that mission, oh boy is she a beast. She has the best stats in the game with some amazing crafts and a destructive S-craft. But what really puts her over the edge into broken territory is her Brave Order, which gives plus 80 CP and 50% critical rate, making her a party-wide damage dealer and a BP generator. Also, she's just a badass. Play the game, you'll know what I mean. Machias Regnans is no stranger to the upper tiers, but he has moved into the God tier strictly because of his ability to accelerate. As is obvious by now, breaking an enemy then accelerating to avoid that enemy recovering is by far the best strategy, and Machias was built to complement this strategy perfectly. Second to last character on the God tier is Reen Sworzer. Reen can do everything better than anyone else. His stats, crafts, S-craft, and 4 Brave Orders. On top of this, he has his Ogre power, which is the best single buff in the game. And of course, you use him throughout your entire playthrough, making him the most accessible character in the game as well. The final character on the list is the most broken and overpowered one. Sarah, the old instructor of Class 7, is absolutely broken. Using the break and accelerate strat is perfected with her Brave Order, which doesn't just accelerate the party, but delays the enemy as well. It can be pretty expensive costing at 4 BP, but with the right supporting characters, this is no problem.
That make you feel all tingly?
Now, as far as the optimal team setup goes, this is a spoiler, so be warned. The optimal team is Reen, Yuna, Kurt, and Musei. Let me tell you why. Because you are forced to use them in the final fight. Yes, over 25 characters, and it is boiled down to 4 of them. This is a huge disappointment. But if you want to ensure the best playthrough, use these characters. In a dream world, the optimal party would be Reen, Sarah, Machias, and Yuna or Aurelia. Hopefully they remedied this in Trails of Cold Steel 4. And this brings us to today's tier list of Trails of Cold Steel 4. I was planning on doing this list much sooner, but needed extra time to get my research done. I love this game. Trails 4 was the perfect end to an excellent series. It also fixed one of my biggest problems with Trails 3, which was the end game teams. In Trails 4, you are not just able to pick from every member of Class 7 for the true final boss, you are able to pick from nearly every playable character across this and other games in the Legend of Heroes series. Because of this, I have broken this list up into 2 parts. Part 1, this video, will look at every single character outside of Class 7. This is much easier than Part 2 since all of these characters have set equipment, levels, quartz, and master quartz in the endgame. Things have changed quite a bit since Trails 3. Back then, the break and delay strategy was absolutely broken. Characters like Yuna, Sarah, and Agate completely obliterated enemies. Because of this, other strats like CP damagers, arts users, and evasion tanks, which had been more of the broken strats in previous games, took a slight backseat, but not this time. Physical damage and break damage, as well as Brave Orders overall, have been nerfed, making this one of the most balanced games in the... oh, never mind. I'm not sure where they missed this, but arts are insane. I mean, absolutely broken. So the overall strategy is to support your magic users while they nuke the competition. I played this on hard and not a single boss stood a chance against my art users. Anyways, keep this in mind as we move forward. Viewers, beware, this list does contain spoilers throughout on characters that join your team. They're not going to ruin the story for you, but just know that there are some spoilers. If you'd like to just know the tier list of Class 7, then check out Part 2. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get started with the tier of Part 1. Aeneas has no S-Craft and really no place on your team. She has decent strength with some damage-dealing skills, but nothing remotely useful when compared to any other party member. Leonidas is slow, incredibly slow. Because of his court setup, his delay is times 1.5, meaning that he'll almost never attack the enemy. Do yourself a favor and just don't use him. The low tier. Zeno comes with a great evasion stat and counter damage, as well as one of the best quartz combinations. Except they're backwards. If he had Sirius as his main quartz and Gugner as his secondary, then we'd have something to talk about. Overall, this guy is squishy and mediocre. Estelle, the hero of Trails in the Sky series, is not treated well in Trails 4. She has high strength and is mostly used to hand out physical damage, but not much else. Enea is a much better choice over her companion Ines, though you still probably shouldn't choose her over other characters. That being said, she has the ability to accelerate and has a Brave Order that grants 100% evasion, which is pretty good. Celine has a single purpose in your party. She's a BP generator with the awesome skill 9 Lives that cures all ailments and stat debuffs while also restoring 3 BP. Aside from that, she has no S-Craft, middling stats, and a mediocre Brave Order. Joshua is a decent evasion tank with an absolutely wasted court setup. I mean, what were they thinking? And that wraps up the low tier. Let's move on to the mid tier. Lloyd's Burning Heart skill is his best aspect. It restores 1 BP, which is pretty good with his tanky build, but his stats leave a lot to be desired. Angelica has decent evasion and an awesome stat boosting skill in Dragon Boost. The best thing about Angelica is her returning Brave Order. Agate is a lesser Randy with a focus towards breaking enemies. If the break system hadn't been nerfed, he might have rated higher. His rage ability is incredibly useful with spamming S-Crafts. If you are trying to choose between Randy and Agate, Randy barely wins out. His War Cry takes less HP and he has incredibly high strength. His quartz setup is also built towards breaking enemies. The final member of the mid-tier is Duvali. The best of the Stall Ritter crew, Duvali has great evasion and BP generating skills, along with one of the highest speed stats of this list. To be honest, she could probably place higher on this list. And that ends it for the mid-tier. Buckle up because our top tier is busting at the seams. First, we have the buxom Ellie, who is one of the best healers on this list. Her S-Craft heals all HP, status ailments, and if she's at 200 CP, heals all EP. This is magnificent with how broken casters are. If that wasn't enough, she has high magic evasion and a skill that can accelerate. So yeah, she's pretty dang good. Ren is the mob clearer of the series with almost every skill causing instant death. Her Brave Order is excellent, accelerating the party while cutting cast time by 50%. The biggest issue with her is that she's not that useful against bosses. Tio's high ATS makes her the second best caster on this list. Her Master Quartz setup of Cats and Virgo only stands to magnify this point. Her Brave Order also comes in handy, granting Absolute Reflect and CP plus 40. Tita is the single best support character on this list. Mostly because of her Mobius Master Quartz, which has been consistently the best Master Quartz in the series. She has high strength and defense, as well as the amazing skill Vital Cannon. Tita is a great choice for your endgame team. Arsade's S-Craft is tied with Aurelia's as the strongest in the game. He has high strength and evasion with a Brave Order that increases break damage. His quartz setup is great, but as the break system isn't what it used to be, he just didn't quite make it to the god tier. Roselia has the best S-Craft to watch. Boop. How can you not like that? Anyway, with how much she's built up throughout the game, you would think that she would be an incredible caster, but her stats are disappointing. But I guess none of that matters, seeing as she has one of the best skills in the game. Bloodfang is awesome. It attacks while simultaneously healing your team's HP and CP. Also, she is equipped with the Grail Locket, blocking any status elements. She's also the mother of Emma, so duh. Toval is insanely mediocre. He really isn't good at all. His only usefulness is to support your casters. Toval's Brave Order Spiral Arts grants no cast time and restores all, yes you heard me, all EP. His horrible court setup, for some reason he's built as a physical attacker instead of a caster, makes no difference as his Brave Order makes your art users unstoppable. Stack him with Emma, Muse, and an evasion tank, and you have a killer team. The God Tier. First on the God Tier is possibly the most surprising entry. George, yes, that George, is the best tank in the game. He even outperforms evasion tanks, which is crazy. His Brave Order gives both magic absorption and complete immunity. George has amazing stats including high defense, ADF, and HP, along with the Aegis Master Quartz, which draws enemies' attention and grants complete immunity 2 times during battle. Pretty much, he can span immunity constantly for himself and the team. Vita is the best caster of the list. She has the highest ATS stat, some decent skills, and a Brave Order that increases damage by 100%, making her a nuclear bomb. The final member of the God Tier is Aurelia. She is so cool. Aurelia has the strongest S-Craft, high strength, speed, and evasion. Also, her Brave Order, Golden Aura, is utterly broken, giving plus 50% critical for 10 turns, plus 80 CP. She also has an amazing court setup and the Grail Locket, making her immune to all elements. There is no contest here. Today we'll be looking at the members of Class 7 and see how they stack up in the final volume of Cold Steel's series. This was not easy. Like I said in part 1, I try to avoid newer games because of the lack of information out there. I have spent an outrageous amount of time poring over Class 7 and will now present my best effort at creating a tier list. Some factors that went into this are important to understand. First, the break and delay strategy has been severely nerfed. This is a good thing because it's let other strategies come to light. That being said, Art's damage is off the charts. There is no better damage dealer than a caster. Yes, even everyone's favorite blue-haired swordsman can't match Art's damage at the end of the day. But damage isn't everything. I've considered support skills, Brave Orders, fixed quartz slots, stats, and accessibility, and about a million other things. So buckle up because today we learn who is best in Trails of Cold Steel 4. Spoiler warning for the here. Skip ahead to the time on the screen if you don't want the ending of Trails of Cold Steel 3 ruined for you. The only member of the tier is Milliam. She is the worst member of Class 7 because, well, she's not there. I know this is cheating, but I wanted to make sure we covered all of Class 7. The low tier. The low tier has 2 members who suffer the same issue. I like to call it can't live up to Reen's shadow effect. First is Eustace, who is mostly built as a support mage. When stacked up to Elisa, Elliot, or Machias, he is already lacking. But when you consider that Reen does everything he does just better, well, you have a low tier member. Even his greatest attribute, Platinum Shield, can become obsolete when Mobius is fully upgraded. Honestly, he hasn't changed much since Trails 3, but maybe that's the problem. The final member of the low tier is Crow. Now again, Crow is not bad, but when compared to Reen, a character that is similar in usefulness but outpaces Crow by a mile, he just can't stack up. I suppose you could have both of them on your team, but at the end game, you'd probably want to make room for a character who brings a different usefulness to the table. The mid-tier. Elliot is a good support character, though surprisingly his ATS stat is fairly low in comparison. Muse, Emma, and even Elisa beat him out in casting potential. Elliot is again overshadowed by other support characters and other casters, but that doesn't mean he's useless. If you're having trouble getting through the game, his S-Craft and Brave Order can come in clutch as they make your party incredibly hard to kill. Kurt is our first victim of severe nerfing. In Trails 3, he is a key member to the break and delay strat. But unfortunately, his Brave Order and crafts have been nerfed, knocking him down a few notches. He's still a very viable character, but due to the new circumstances, he is a middle-of-the-road choice for an endgame team. Elisa is one of the better support characters. She has a hyper-focused pierce attack that can crit pretty regularly, an above-average ATS stat for casting, and still holds one of the better abilities in the game, Heavenly Gift, which grants HP and CP regain as well as insight. The issue here is that her support isn't as crucial as it has been in previous games. She doesn't quite fit the niche she has had in the series thus far. Elisa is still an ideal Mobius user, but overall she isn't crucial to your endgame team. Now, I know many of you consistently disagree with me as to Lara's placement so far in these lists. She's been in the low or mid tier throughout the series, and I'll attempt to explain my reasoning one last time. Lara serves a single purpose: physical damage. She literally has no other use whatsoever. If you have a team built around supporting her, she can potentially one-hit many bosses. But unlike a caster powerhouse like Muse or Emma, if for whatever reason you are unable to take advantage of her raw power in battle, she becomes basically useless. The Lara team strat has been a consistent endgame team since the beginning. It's a great strategy, but I would argue that it has never been the best endgame strategy. Back in Trails 1 and 2, Fee's evasion was unique and useful enough to break the entire game. That hasn't changed necessarily here, but high evasion is much more common to come by. And like Lara, Fee's single usefulness is overshadowed by characters with multiple uses. She's a solid team member, but comparing her to a character like Sarah, who has slightly less evasion aptitude but a host of other qualities that elevate her, Fee's placement at the top of the mid-tier starts to make a whole lot more sense. The top tier. The top tier is full of characters who fill multiple roles better than most who fill just one. The first of this is Altina. Altina in Trails 3 suffered from insane speed deficiency. She was so slow that all their qualities became obsolete. Overall, she has gotten a stat boost across the board, and her Brave Order remains one of the best in the game. She has high ATS, making her a useful caster as well as a Mobius user. Overall, she is probably one of the most improved characters from the previous title. Next up on the top tier is Yuna. Yuna was absolutely broken in Trails 3. In fact, I probably should have put her in the God tier if I'm being honest. But Sledgehammer has been nerfed to a nearly unrecognizable level. Now, with her usefulness changing from Trails 3, why is she still in the top tier? Well, it's because she traded breaking enemies for excelling at everything else. Other than Sarah, Yuna is one of the most well-rounded characters in the game. She has amazing stats, awesome crafts including one that accelerates the party, and another that can fill the BP gauge. Yuna is a no-brainer for any endgame team. What Lara lacks in versatility, Ashe more than makes up for. Ashe is a powerhouse with an absolutely broken Brave Order that increases critical as well as buffs party attack power. Lara benefits highly from being paired with him. He has a link ability that heals his own CP and crafts that give him almost everything a player would need. Ashe is a huge step up from his Trails 3 counterpart. Machias is the single best supporting character in Trails 4. He's been consistently good in every installment in the series. His Brave Order is a better version of Kurt's, with cheap S-crafts that can put multiple status elements and delay on the enemy. Ask any veteran in the series what is key in battle, and they would say turn order. He and Yuna's ability to accelerate the party is pivotal to this and is key in having a game-breaking team. The final member of the top tier is Muse. So I got a lot of comments saying that people actually love this character, and that makes me happy. Muse is awesome, both in plot and battle. Her ATS is off the charts, and she can be built to absolutely demolish enemies. What Muse lacks is useful crafts and S-crafts. Her Brave Order is great and can come in handy with the Chrono Strat and using Lost Arts, but she is just barely edged out of the God tier because of this. The God tier. Sarah. The developers thought they had nerfed the game, but despite all the changes, Sarah continues to be broken. Her stats overall are better than anyone else's. She has amazing strength, ATS, and evasion, as well as range and superb crafts. Her Brave Order, despite the break system being nerfed, is fantastic. She fits every role perfectly and can fill in the gaps in any final team. It took 4 games, but Gaius has finally come to himself. Honestly, when considering the story, this actually makes a lot of sense. Gaius is the purveyor of what the community likes to call the not your turn strategy. He has the single best S-craft in the series, which despite severe nerfs to everything else, has been untouched. He can delay any enemy, including bosses, ignoring any resistances they may have. His crafts are CP cheap. Using him correctly will ensure that your enemies never have a chance to attack, period. Emma. What can I say about Emma that hasn't been said before? She is the single best caster in the game. Her arts damage is uncomparable to everyone except for Muse. But beyond this, her S-craft is just plain broken. Complete invulnerability times 2 on a character like this is mind-blowing. Seriously, time things right and Emma will both be your best attacker and defender. I will say one thing, her romance with Reen has been incredibly fun, especially their heart-to-heart moments in Trails 4, but the climax was disappointing, to say the least. Anyway, moving on. Reen is the best character in the game. There is no contest at all. Divine Song breaks this game completely. No cast time plus the absolute broken nature of arts. Yeah, there is just nothing that compares at all. He also has amazing crafts, S-craft, and stats. That is enough, Reen receives a host of broken items from completing bonds with characters. These range from an absolutely ridiculous evasion buff to complete immunity to ailments. His ogre power has been nerfed, but this makes absolutely no difference. Reen is the perfect example of a god tier character.
Trails and Reverie was the culmination of years and years of storytelling. It technically wraps up the plot lines of both the Crossbell duology and the 4 Trails of Cold Steel games. It's also Falcom at their very best. Trails and Reverie boasts a cast of 51 characters. Now there are a few specifics we need to get into here before we start this tier list. First, Reverie is broken up between a plot following 3 different storylines and the Reverie Corridor. The 3 plot lines converge into a final boss, and the majority of the characters are available during this finale. The true finale, though, happens in the Reverie Corridor, where you work your way through a multi-floor dungeon to the true boss. When considering accessibility, ultimately we'll focus in on availability at the end of the storyline and the Reverie Corridor. Second, almost any character can be broken with the right quartz, master quartz, and endgame equipment. What we are examining is their innate abilities, mainly crafts, S-craft, brave orders, stats, character-specific equipment, and link abilities. Assume that the best possible quartz setup is given to each character for this list. Third, magic has been nerfed slightly for this game. Unlike the godly damage in Trails of Cold Steel 4, it's still amazing, but not as amazing as it was. And physical attackers and physical-based attacks can actually pull ahead in the late game. Fourth, when it comes to damage, I'll be referring to 3 types. One is burst damage, meaning large amounts of damage that can be thrown on enemies all at once, and sustained damage, which is ongoing damage throughout the battle. The final is break damage, which is the damage placed on enemies' break meters. When it comes to support, there is debuffing, which is decreasing stats, and plaguing, which is casting ailments on enemies. Both are very important, as no enemy is completely immune to all stat debuffs and ailments. Finally, a character's ability to master a role or multiple roles, be it support, DPS, breaker, BP battery, CP battery, tank, debuffer, or plaguer, will be very important, as you only use 4 characters in battle. So someone who can manage multiple roles will land high on this list. A note, I want to give a shout out to the Dark Knight, who wrote one of the most comprehensive guides I have ever read. I used it heavily in my playthrough, and though my opinions here differ from theirs, I think that this is the most accurate guide on the internet. I've left a link in the description for anyone who wants to see it. Finally, be sure to stick around till the end where we'll reveal the optimal party for your playthrough, as well as a bonus list. We'll start with the tier. Swin's character-specific mechanic is broken, and not in a good way. Marking enemies for crits ends up being an absolute waste of time, and for a character whose niche is critical attacks, he sure gets passed up all the time. If you ignore his mechanics altogether, he's actually better as a subpar caster. Celine is a gimmick character, and even though she can potentially be the best BP battery in the game, her 2 crafts cost way too much, and she has no burst damage whatsoever due to lacking an S-craft. Altogether, she's one of the worst party members in Reverie. The low tier. George is a lesser version of Altina and Millium, with the only available role to fill being a tank. Lecter is way too random to be useful in any capacity. He's a decent plaguer, but he desperately needs a CP battery to keep him running. Olivier is only in the low tier because he is one of the best magic DPS supports in the game with his link abilities. Aside from that, he's both mediocre in magic damage and healing. Millium is incredibly slow. She makes for a decent plaguer and tank, but overall is just underwhelming. Tio has great crafts, but can't dish out enough damage to make them worth it. She's outpaced by every caster in the game and manages to dodge the tier due to her helpful Brave Order, which grants invulnerability for 4 turns. Similar to Tio, Elise, despite her awesome self buff, still can't dash out average damage, and as a support she's passed up entirely by units like Elliot or Alphen. Ash has decent burst damage and a great self buff, but he is incredibly crippled by his immense delay of his crafts. He's better as a caster because you can forego the insane delay times, and he has a decent ATS stat. Angelica hits hard. Similar to Estelle, she's a great breaker and DPS, but lacks the additional utility of Estelle. Aside from above average burst damage and causing faint, she lacks any other utility. Victor is the king of burst damage, but lacks any other purpose beyond it. Ultimately, you're far better off using his daughter Lara. Alright, we're going to split the mid-tier into 2 sections, so let's start with the lower mid-tier. First on the lower mid-tier is Tita. Tita is almost great. She has an expensive Brave Order that, if it maxed out strength, would be worth your time. Her size and incredible stats make her an ideal tank, as well as a healer and CP battery. If her Brave Order was better, and she was faster, she would easily be top tier. Muse does exclusive magical damage, so she suffers in the DPS role. She's ultimately ideal for healing and as a plaguer, as well as controlling enemy positions with her suction attack. Eustace is probably the most average character in the game with average damage, average utility via his crafts, and an average Brave Order. Platinum Shield is nice, but Emma's Crescent Blessing blows him out of the water. Estelle is the single best breaker in the game next to McBurn. She doesn't have many crafts, but True Wheel of Time hits like an absolute truck, upping her burst damage. Her main draw is that if paired with Joshua, she becomes immensely more useful as their pairing and link abilities are the best in the game. Wazi is a lesser C. He has a rare damaging HP and CP recovery craft, but just lacks the breaking damage. The only thing he has over C is his ability to purge enemies of their buffs, but that's not enough to bring him up a tier. And speaking of, let's move on to the upper mid tier. First up is Altina. Altina has a great kit, but unfortunately her build contradicts itself. Stealth and Physical Reflect make her practically unkillable, but in order to do any damage, you'll want her casting from the back row, so she really doesn't need all the tanking crafts and abilities. Claire has a great self buff and makes for an awesome evasion tank. Unfortunately, her freeze element isn't all that useful as many enemies are immune to it. What you'll most likely use her for is her god tier Brave Order, which is the single best boss breaking Brave Order in the game. Alphen has terrible damage with absolutely no burst to speak of. She has the ability to cast Weakness, which is the single best debuff in the game, but she can only cast it on a single target, making her the worst weakness caster. Ultimately, the only reason Alphen made it to the upper mid tier is that she's an amazing BP battery. In fact, that's really her only usefulness altogether. Elliot, like Alphen, has terrible damage. but he is the single best healer in the game. He's an average plaguer, but if he's on your team with the right build, it'll be nearly impossible to kill your party. Duvali, even without a self buff to call her own, hits top tier damage numbers. She's so fast and has such low delay that it's actually better to use her crafts than to attack regularly. Because of this, she's a great breaker, though you will absolutely need a CP battery to support her on your team. A lesser self buff and smaller areas of attack make Kurt underwhelming when compared to Reen and Arios. His main draw is turn manipulation. With Supreme Blade and Sword Dance, he can destroy turn order, rearranging it in your favor. Joshua's damage is decent, though his real draw is that he has a damaging craft that leads into stealth, making him very difficult to kill. Tag on his link potential with Estelle, and he's not half bad. But unfortunately, or fortunately depending on how you look at it, Rishia is always the better choice. His high CP costs and lack of a self buff just make it so he can't even compete with her. Due to the ability to instantly max out strength, Agate has amazing burst damage. He has the second best breaking Brave Order in the game, buffing strength while increasing break damage by 200%. His crafts are pretty much useless and he lacks any plague or debuff potential, so he isn't as useful as Randy. Noelle is one of the best plaguer debuffers in Reverie with her long range, large area of attack, and 4 lines on her orbiment, making it easy to load her up with status inflicting quartz. Give her some evasion equipment and spam her Brave Order and you have a pretty solid tank, though her damage could be better. Sharon is also one of the best debuffers in the game since almost all of her crafts and her normal attack hit more than once, increasing the chance of landing a debuff. She also has awesome break damage and link abilities for support. If she had a long range weapon, she'd have made for a solid evasion tank. Fee overall is a lesser Risha and Sarah. She has terrible burst damage, but makes for the second best evasion tank in the game next to Sarah with her long range weapon and natural evasion stat. Similar to Kurt and Joshua though, with Risha and Sarah in existence, there just isn't much of a reason to use her. Randy, like Agate, has amazing burst damage, but unlike Agate, Randy can break enemies' defense with his S-Craft, inflict burn, and multiply damage with his Brave Order. Ultimately, this makes him better than Agate, though they are extremely comparable. Emma's Crescent Blessing is absolutely insane in the late game. It cures elements, revives fallen allies, heals, gives 50 CP, and casts Art Reflect. It might be one of the single best supporting crafts in the game. Emma's S-Craft casts Reflect, which is great in tough situations. If she had an ATS self buff, she could also be one of the better damage dealers as well, though Crow and Vita blow her out of the water in this aspect. Elisa's Heavenly Gift has always been one of the best crafts in the series. It casts CP and HP regain, as well as insight, increasing evasion. The fact that it hits her as well only increases her usefulness. Unfortunately, Elisa has terrible damage, making her once again a full-on support, perhaps evasion tank. Toval comes with above average magical damage, a rocking master course that optimizes magical damage, a Brave Order that removes cast times, and link abilities perfect for supporting other arts users. His Brave Order is less useful in the late game as cast time is usually relieved by quartz, but he still makes for a great secondary caster and mage support. Yuna is a decent BP battery with one of the better breaking Brave Orders in Reverie. She's also one of 2 characters who can accelerate with a craft, though hers was immensely nerfed, making Machias the obvious choice over her. Despite this, she makes for an amazing evasion tank and debuffer with her long range, medium area of attack moveset. Phew, that was long. Let's move into the best characters in the game. We'll start with the top tier. Ren is a great dual caster and physical damager. She generates BP without needing to attack and has the best accelerating Brave Order in the game. What makes her truly deadly is her ability to heal EP while casting an ATS buff, making her an ideal caster. Lara has some of the best burst and sustain damage in the game with what might be considered the best Brave Order in Reverie. She's pretty straightforward and lacks utility, but as a DPS, you'll be hard pressed to find someone better. Roselia's maximum ATS buff in her Brave Order and the highest damaging HP CP recovery craft make her an absolute damaging machine. Her S-Craft all but guarantees inflicting burn on every enemy on the battlefield, and she has great mage support. Lloyd has one of the best single buffs in Reverie and makes for a great BP battery. He is the king of inflicting feint and causing unbalance, turning every character into a BP battery as well. He's super stable with defensive stats and 2 useful Brave Orders. Nadia is one of the best mages through the main plot of the game due to having an incredible character-specific equipment that all but eliminates cast time. She's also incredibly versatile with the ability to break, heal, evade, and counter with her long-range physical weapon, and on top of all that, she can inflict weakness to multiple enemies, making her all around one of the best casters in Reverie. If Gaia's self-buff didn't drop his HP, he'd be higher on this list, but top tier means he's still absolutely one of the best choices for your team. Absolute Delay is absurdly broken, and similar to Cold Steel 4, can be employed to indefinitely delay all enemies in the game. Just make sure you have a CP battery to back him up. Aurelia isn't just one of the best damage dealers because of her insane stats and incredible crafts, but she also has one of the best link ability setups for counter damage. Link her to someone on the front lines and she'll almost always counter. Her Brave Order also heals CP and increases strength. Lapis has the single best self buff in Reverie, trading EP for HP, CP, and a strength, ATS, and speed buff. Grimoire Arc also has the ability to inflict a boatload of ailments, making her one of the best plaguers in the game. She's great as a physical tank or a caster, making her very flexible. Reen's Spirit Unification, especially its final form, makes him a god tier burst and sustain damager. Aside from that, he can also purge and debuff, but lacks any other support ability, making him strictly a damage dealer. If C had higher damage potential, he would have most likely landed on the god tier. He's probably one of the single most useful party members in the game. He can spread ailments, generate BP, heal HP and CP while also damaging the enemy, has an amazing self buff, and can cure ailments. Like I said, all he's really missing is damage. Toa is the best debuffer in the game. She can inflict weakness, her S-Craft inflicts stat down on all stats, she can cast Analyze, making her a BP battery, and Energy Rain restores HP, EP, and CP. Aside from damage, there is nothing Toa can't do. Ellie is Toa's superior due to a full heal S-Craft, a wider area of attack that can inflict weakness on nearly every enemy on the battlefield, and an accelerating Brave Order. All in all, she's the best weakness inflictor, which automatically makes her a must for most party compositions. Sarah makes for the best evasion tank in Reverie with amazing burst and sustain damage, along with high crit chance, making her a BP battery as well. She's ideal for plague spreading and debuffing and has a suction craft, allowing her to manipulate enemy placement. She also can accelerate using her Brave Order. Crow just barely missed the god tier due to his self buff being quite CP expensive. With that being said, Crow has high burst and sustained damage with one of the best ATS stats in Reverie. He makes an awesome evade tank BP battery with insight casting and a long range weapon. He can also inflict ailments easily with his normal crafts. His self buff, though expensive, does last longer than McBurn and Reen's, though it doesn't change his crafts, which is a bummer. If paired with Vita, you would have one of the deadliest magical DPS couples in the game. The God Tier. McBurn is the single best party member, well, in Trail's history. With his self buff, he's practically unstoppable, capable of delivering the most damage of any character in Reverie. His basic crafts buffs his attack, he can purge enemies, he almost always inflicts plague, and has a Brave Order that heals CP. He can buff himself to the max and use his S-Craft all in the same turn. The reason he's not number 1 on this list is that he's only available in the post-game, making him the least accessible party member, which ultimately makes sense. Arios can buff strength and speed with a minuscule amount of delay. He can purge, spread plagues, and breaks enemies effortlessly, all while hitting the entire battlefield with his huge AoE attacks. Twin Arc Gel hits all enemies twice and makes for a deadly ailment and status inflicting attack, as well as simultaneously purging enemies with their debuffs. He can buff himself offensively and defensively in the time it takes most characters to buff themselves at all. All in all, Arios is absolutely broken. Vita has incredibly high burst damage and has the single best Brave Order in the game, doubling damage across the board. She is the best BP battery with nearly guaranteed crits and insanely high break damage. Almost every one of her attacks hits a large area, and on top of that, she has a long range physical weapon, making her an amazing evasion tank. The real clincher though is her link ability support. Paired with Crow, Nadia, or Roselia, she can buff their arts damage to its max, making her the only character capable of increasing magical damage to its absolute highest point. Bar a late game recruitment, Machias is the single most useful party member in Reverie and possibly in the entire series. He has great sustained and burst AoE damage, a brave order that increases strength and defense while cutting delay in half for only 3 BP, and is the only other character aside from Yuna that can accelerate using a craft. What makes his accelerating craft so amazing is that it also heals EP, making him a solid support for casters. Oh, did I mention that he's also on par with Noelle for debuffing? Yeah, don't sleep on Machias. Risha, all in all, is the best character in the game. You have her from the beginning, so accessibility is high. Her true Moonlight Butterfly self-buff is absolutely incredible, increasing strength and speed while casting stealth. She has a cheap speed brave order that can push turn order ahead. She also has the best craft in the game, being able to suction enemies while also delaying them, all for incredibly cheap amounts of CP. If all that wasn't enough, she has the best S-craft, meaning that aside from McBurn, she has the best burst damage in Reverie, hitting enemies like a truck while also inflicting 2 elements that are rarely resisted. Now as for optimal team, there are so many options here. You could go for a CP heavy team with McBurn, Reen, C, and Arios. Or a magical powerhouse with Toa, Crow, Roselia, and Vita. Switch in Machias for Roselia and you have a sustainable magic team. Heck, you could even run an unkillable team with Rishia, Sarah, Vita, and Arios. The options are endless. My team ended up being Reen, Rishia, Ellie, and Emma. And that's our list. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you to all my Patreon members, and if you would like to request your own tier list, consider joining the Pro tier for only $5 a month. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Bonus round. Top 10 best dressed ladies go. Number 10, Lara's magical girl dress. Number 9, Yuna's outerwear. Number 8, Ellie's eastern wear. Number 7, Musei's Quilin dress. Number 6, Sharon's Enforcer outfit. Number 5, Emma's magical girl dress. Number 4, Rishia's wedding outfit. Number 3, Sarah's ninja outfit. Number 2, Elisa's Vofon outfit. And number 1, Rishia's original assassin outfit. For the guys, it's C.
深い悲しみの